My name is Sammy, and I'm super excited to be here to share a little bit about myself and about Jesus. Um, I know it's been a tough summer, right? It's been a tough year. There's a lot that's gone on. There's a lot that's gone on, and from the COVID virus to just the racial injustices and how that's all impacted your school year, and how that's bleeding into your summers. I know it's been hard. I know it's been hard. And so my hope is that I get to share a little bit about Jesus and why I find hope in him and why I have hope in God, and how that helps me move along and keep going, right? Because we all need a little nudge or a push sometimes, because sometimes it feels like you really just can't go anymore. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Seattle. I love Seattle, all things Seattle. If I were to rank, and I love sports, and so if I were to rank all my favorite sports teams, it would be anything UW related. So go Huskies, whether that be football or basketball, baseball, whatever it is. I'm just all about the Dogs. And then from there, it depends on what time of year and how I'm feeling. But yeah, there's obviously, the Seahawks, and as downtrodden as the Mariners are, I still love them. They're my team. And then of course there's the Sonics, my favorite team growing up as a kid. And there's a lot of bitterness that I still hold, and I don't know if I'll be able to let go. But so really, what that means is I'm a Seattle dude through and through. Like, I love Seattle, and I love all things Seattle. I love watching movies. I love watching TV shows. I love watching all sorts of stuff, and I love music. I love music. I'm a kid from the 80s and 90s, right? And so most of my musical choices come from that time, the 90s, whether that be hip hop, R&B, rock, alternative, all of that. I love. And so I don't know if you're not familiar with any of that, I suggest you go and educate yourself. You have abundant resources to go and look up what 90s music was all about. And I urge you to go and do so. Aside from that, well, actually, no, not aside from that, but why I love all of that is, especially like music and movies and shows, is that they share stories, right? They talk about stories. And you're invited into these stories. And sometimes from these stories, you get to see a little bit about yourself, or they talk about things that you yourself don't know how to put words to, but you feel or experience. And in a similar way, the stories from the Bible and how God reveals God through Jesus is a lot like music and stories and movies and TV shows. Like, there are things that Jesus says and that God reveals, that I don't know how to I didn't know how to put words to, but by reading this and hearing about it, it comes alive, and I feel like I'm being brought in. Now, for me, as a person of color, a Korean American, sometimes I feel like the stories of Jesus and God that I hear aren't always for me. Right? As a minority, sometimes I don't feel that these stories are for me, because the loudest voices and the most voices seem to be coming from more of the dominant culture. And let's just name that's white culture, right? And so sometimes, even though I was born here, I sometimes feel like I'm an outsider. And that when I hear these stories, sometimes it just doesn't feel like it's for me. But when I read the stories a little bit more in depth, what I see Jesus communicating, what I see God revealing, is that God is for the very person on the outside, the very furthest out, right? That's who God brings to the center that God pulls him to the center and tells everybody, into wanting to tell that person, no, I am for you. I'm for you, and I'm for people like you. And collectively, we need to work together to make them feel like they're part of the whole and elevate their voices and give them a platform. Make them feel loved. And the story that I love that speaks to me more than any other story right now is this story about Jesus. He's traveling, right? He's trying to get to this place called Galilee. And in order to do so, the shortest route is a place called Samaria, this area called Samaria. But nobody that's Jewish, like Jesus, goes through Samaria. And the reason being is that the Jewish people and the Samaritan people have had a centuries-long conflict with one another. They hate each other. They absolutely hate each other. And so they don't want to have anything to do with one another. But Jesus doesn't want to take the long way around Samaria. He wants to get to Galilee in the shortest way possible. And the way he does that is cutting through Samaria. And so he sets off on his way through that particular area. Now, as Jesus is traveling, he gets tired. He gets tired, and he comes to this town that has this well. And so he sits at this well, and it's the hottest time of the day. It's noon. And when he sits there, this woman comes, this Samaritan woman comes all by herself in the middle of the day, the hottest part of the day. And this is significant because people of that time, women of that time in that town, did not come to the well at noon because it was the hottest time of the day. So when they did come was most likely in the morning when it was cooler, or maybe even at night, but never in the middle of the day. Why put yourself through all that heat if you don't have to, right? So there's some reason why this woman came in the middle of the day. And I'm going to venture to guess is because there was something about this woman that all the other women of the town did not like. There's something about this woman where if she was with these other women, they would either ostracize her and kick her out, or they would make it so hard on her that she just couldn't bear being with these other women. And I think for all of us, we felt something like that before, where we haven't been included, or the people around us make it so hard that it's better for us to be alone because we just can't bear all that hurt that's thrown upon us. And so this woman comes. Just imagine all the burden that she's carrying, all the loneliness that she's carrying. And she comes to this well, and there's already this man. And Jesus, being thirsty, says, "Can you give me a drink?" And she knows that Jesus is a Jewish dude. I'm sure it's evident, right? Right? They're from different people groups, and it's evident to her. And she's like, "Who are you, a man, a Jewish man, to ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink?" It's basically saying, we're not supposed to interact, right? Our shadows aren't even supposed to cross. That's how much you guys hate us. So how are you asking me for a drink of water? And then he goes, if you knew that God is actually asking you for a drink of water, you'd then be asking me for water instead. Because what I can provide you is living water where you won't go thirsty again. And for this woman, I can't imagine all the different things that were going around in her mind and in her heart and all through her body. Because like we had mentioned, there's something about this woman where she's alone. And when you're alone, guys, there's so much going on inside of you, right? You are thirsty. You're thirsty for community. You're thirsty for acceptance. You're thirsty to be loved. And this guy, Jesus, is saying that I can have all of that, that I won't go thirsty again. Like, I want that. I want that. And then Jesus goes, okay, go call your husband. And then this woman says, well, I don't have a husband. And Jesus goes, you're right. You don't have a husband. In fact, you've had 5 husbands, and the man that you're with now is not your husband. And I don't think this is an indictment on this woman. He's just simply stating her history. And what we need to know about this is that women of the time, in order to protect themselves, in order to survive, they just had to be under the protection of a male, right? And so when, for instance, when a woman's husband dies, oftentimes she gets absorbed into the family of her husband's brother so that she's protected and she has resources provided to her, that she could have a home, that she could eat. And I don't know what the circumstances of this woman is. I don't know if that was the case or if there were other reasons why she has had 5 husbands and the woman and the man that she's with now is not her husband. But I just think this woman is trying to survive. And for a lot of us, especially of those that have been hurt along the way, we're just trying to survive. And as we're surviving, labels get put on us. Labels get put on us that says a lot of things that we aren't. And sometimes if we hear it enough, we end up believing those labels are true, whatever they may be. And the sad thing about that is it takes away from us realizing who we really are. Because in the Bible, it says that we are all made in the image of God. And that when we were made, that when God made people, God said we were made well, that we were made good. But along the way, all through, and this goes for all of us, when we live life and we get labels thrust on us, and we hear it so often, sometimes we end up believing that about ourselves. And this light that we all have, this light of God that we all have, gets dimmer and dimmer as we go. And so much so that sometimes we forget that that light is there, and all we see is darkness, and all we feel inside is darkness. And I think that's where this woman was in life. But here comes this guy, Jesus, and basically says, no, I'm here to give you water. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your story is. All I know is that you're hurting. All I know is that you need love. And I'm here to tell you that the God of the universe is here for you. That the God of the universe isn't just for my people, but this God is for you too. The people that I'm supposed to hate the most, this God is for you. And I'm going to bring you right into the center of this story. And I'm going to bring you right into the middle of it all to tell you that you are loved and that you are accepted. That's crazy news. That's really good news. Not just for her, but for all of us. She runs to her town because she recognizes that something happened in that moment, that the God of the universe entered into her life there and said, I'm loved. And that's something that she couldn't hold inside. And she ran to her town and said, you've got to hear this message. You've got to listen to this guy. There's something about him. There's something about him. And so what I want you guys to know is that despite your identity, despite your gender, despite your culture, or actually the better word for it is because of your identity, because of your gender, because of your culture, or whatever you may identify as, God is saying through Jesus, you, the people that feel most on the outside, I want to let you know that I'm bringing you right to the center because you matter. You matter individually, and you all matter collectively. You all matter collectively. And I want you to experience love in a way that you are always meant to experience it, through acceptance. That you're a part of this family. And that nobody should be excluded. So when you think and you read these stories or you hear these stories from elsewhere and you feel like that's just not for me, or it seems like that's kicking me out to the side, or there's something about it that's not resonating, I think maybe whoever's giving that talk is missing the mark. I think whatever song's communicating that to you is missing the mark. Because at the center of all the stories, at the center of everything Jesus does and says, tells me that when I'm feeling on the outside, I'm actually on the inside. That when I'm feeling like this isn't about me and this God isn't for me, what Jesus is saying that it is for me. And it's for people like me. And that if I'm on the inside, right, and I'm pushing people out, then I've got to work to bring those on the outside in. That's also my responsibility. And that's really cool news. That's why I want to follow this God. And that's why I want to follow this Jesus. And that's why I'm here to share, right? And I can't wait to bring more stories of Jesus to you guys. And I can't wait for you guys to dig in yourselves with your friends, with your leader, on why this Jesus is so cool. Also that you can hear this message of love and acceptance.